All right. So an ad right up at the top. Don't skip though, listeners. We've got an exciting course that's coming up in our e-learning courses. And who is teaching this course, Carol?
It is our friend in Seattle, Barbara Livner, container designer extraordinaire.
That's right. So March 14th is when the classes start. They're on demand. This is the ultimate guide to container garden design with Barbara Livner. It is an amazing multi-part course. You don't have to watch it all live. These are all pre-taped that you'll be able to go step by step and get inside the head of a really, truly talented container garden designer. We have done more container garden articles with Barbara Livner in the history of fine gardening than any other designer for a reason, right, Carol?
Absolutely. She is a joy to work with, and she is so innovative. She thinks of putting things in containers, new things every time. I'm amazed by her.
That's right. So this course is going to have multiple recipes that you'll be able to follow along with and be able to recreate in your own backyard for the spring season. And the other great part about this is that Barbara actually operates a Q&A within each one of the courses. So you can put any of your questions that you might have and get a direct answer from Barbara on all of your container conundrums. So March 14th is when the course starts. If you want to sign up or learn more information, go to courses.finegardening.com. Again, that's courses.finegardening.com for more information. And welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm associate editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
Hey, good morning, good evening, whenever you're listening, listeners. This is Danielle. I'm executive editor at Fine Gardening Magazine. And today, Carol, we are talking about tight, compact, what are we talking
about? Compact plants for tight spaces.
Yes, that is it. That is what we were talking about, dear listeners. Yes, really, just awesome plants that fit into those narrow spaces, those awkward spaces. I was writing the intro for our show notes on this, and I thought, I wonder how big the average lot size is for the average homeowner in North America. And it is surprisingly small. And I saw some statistics that the standard lot size has been decreasing steadily since the 1970s. So, you think about a great majority of us live in spots where, we've got a postage stamp or maybe an even smaller than a postage stamp size area to garden in. And that means if you want variety, you can't have big old honking plants that take up 10 by 10 spaces. You need petite plants or plants that are a little bit more well-behaved, I guess.
Yes. And even if you have an estate, you still have spots where a compact plant is going to make sense next to a pathway, along, a little narrow alleyway between two buildings, something like that. And you need something that isn't going to get in your way. So
absolutely.
Almost anybody can use these.
Yeah, I have a pretty big property. It's wooded, it's rural, it's not an estate. I wish it was, but we've talked about this tons. I have tons of woody plants. Like that is the main matrix of my garden. But, now that many of those have reached mature sizes, I'm noticing gaps, and they're appreciable gaps. You can see them, but I need something that I need to shoehorn into that area. And really, quite frankly, I just don't want to deal with annuals. So I need a well-formed perennial to really fill in that hole. So again, a compact plant for a tight space. So Carol, hit me up. What are my options for that type of plant?
You want general or do you want a specific plant? Because
I want to know specifically what is on your list, Carol, because
all
that's what
right.
I'm going to put on my list.
Very good. Well, I'm going to give you my first one is the most recent plant that I impulse bought before the frosts in the fall. And we're in the winter now, so it is going through its first winter out there. And that is Ivory Halo dogwood. That's Cornus alba bale halo. And it is hardy, super cold hardy from zones 3 to 7. And what I like about this little dogwood, it's small. It stays 5 to 6 feet tall and wide. And if that's too big for you, you can sort of coppice it or renovation prune it periodically to keep it the size you want. But it's a little suckering shrub. And it's beautiful in every season. And that's why I wanted it in the spot where I'm putting it. It's along a property line. It's at the feet of some larger conifers. And I needed something in the foreground. This is the view from my office window. And
Nice.
so this little dogwood has beautiful variegated foliage all summer long. It doesn't really have fall foliage. The leaves just kind of drop off in the fall after the frost, but it has these beautiful red twigs. And those are, a focal point through the winter months until spring. It does flower. It has white flowers. Mine has definitely not flowered yet, but an older plant will flower. It has these white berries that birds like. So it has a lot of really cool ornamental features, and it's a very hardworking little shrub. Compared to other dogwoods that people might be familiar with, like dog eyes, which gets really quite big, this one is, manageable, more of a shrub, less of a tree. And so I thought, okay, this is a good one to put on my list, but I didn't have a photo. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I don't take photos like I should when I put in a new plant, right? I was like, I surely must have taken one photo of this, but I didn't. So I went to this is a Bailey Nurseries introduction. You can kind of tell from its scientific name, Bale Halo. So I went to their website to get the photo. And while I was there, I saw another one that I need. It is a sort of golden leaf version of this little Tartarian dogwood. It's a neon burst dogwood, Cornus alba bouquet. I think it's that. I'm not sure if I'm getting that name right.
But nobody's here to correct us. Yes, that is exactly what it is.
And so that one has the coloration. I would compare it to Sun King Aurelia, which has got that chartreuse and gold mix. And it does have the red twigs in the winter. And so I thought, oh boy, if I want a little more color, same size, same everything, full sun to partial shade, average to moist, well-drained soil, this other one would be a very good addition and sort of a sparkle of color to go against my variegated dogwood. I might have to start collecting these little dogwoods. I don't know.
That's awesome. I think the yellow version or the chartreusey version, we had featured in new plants a couple of years ago from Bailey's, and it was really like that golden leaf against the reddish stem. That's a really beautiful combination, which doesn't sound beautiful when you say it, but it is. It's really, really stunning. So I love the Ivory Halo. I think that's an awesome, awesome plant. I feel like that's a popular plant with Courtney Olander, who's a designer out on the West Coast that we've worked with a lot. And so in several of her articles that she's done for Fine Gardening, you'll see that plant featured. And she uses it in suburban settings in Seattle where there's these, smaller lots, and she uses them as, some structure and backing. And if I remember, I will drop a link into the show notes for one particular photo I'm thinking of that was in one of Courtney's articles. It's a beautiful 4-season shrub. Like, you nailed it. If you're gonna choose a shrub that is a dwarf shrub and compact, like, hey, make sure it shines in all the seasons. That was a good one. Oh man, Now I got to follow that up.
The one thing I forgot to mention too about the neon burst is that it does have fall color. So if you're looking for one of these that does all 4 seasons, this one, it's got like this rainbow, purple, red, yellow, orange. So they say on the website, but I believe them. And yeah, in addition to good color all the rest of the time too. Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. You gotta quickly send an email to Bailey Nurseries, Ryan at Bailey Nurseries, and say, hey, I need a sample plant just to make sure that the fall color is accurate, just to make sure. All right. Well, I feel like, we're from the Northeast. We garden in the Northeast. A lot of times we try our best to, recommend plants for different regions. And I feel like we do a pretty decent job of giving plants that have a large zonal range. Right now, I'm going to throw a bone out to the Southern gardeners because I fell in love with a plant that was at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte Botanic Gardens a couple years ago. And I can't stop thinking about this plant. It's one that I can't grow, but I've done some research on it, and that's creeping variegated gardenia. So it's Gardenia jasminoides, radicans variegata, zones 8 to 11. So, please, Northern gardeners, don't tune out because it's definitely worth hearing about, but it's not something that I can grow. It's got a lot of different, sometimes it's called Cape jasmine, but I'm just going to go with creeping gardenia because that's what it looks like. You think of gardenias, you think of the glossy foliage. Yes, this plant has that foliage. However, it's got more of a gray-green leaf to it that's kind of teardrop shape and this beautiful creamy white margin edge to it. So a really stunning, stunning combination. When I first saw this from afar, I thought this was Carol Mackey Daphne. It was that compact and that tight and that really, you just want to squeeze it kind of shape to it. The standard species, the straight species, that's a pretty big plant. That can get 3 to 6 feet tall and wide. Well, this variegated variety, Radicans variegata, is only 1 to 2 feet high and 2 to 4 feet wide. So considerably smaller and really a just tight ground covery type shrub that would do very well as well if you put it into an even smaller space. It plays nicely with kind of growing around its neighbors and not enveloping its neighbors. Really what we should talk about, though, is the fragrant flowers. I mean, gardenia. It is one of the classic scents. It is a beautiful, clean, almost, some people describe it as baby powder smell to the flowers. The flowers on this particular variety are a bit smaller than the straight species. They only get to be about 1 inch in diameter. But that's not small. I mean, that's not an insignificant size. They're white. They are star-shaped, much like you would imagine a gardenia jasmine cross would look like. And they start in late spring and go through into the summer, typically for its major flush of blooms. If you live in the warmer end of its range, though, say zone 9, 10, 11, this is a sporadic bloomer year-round for you. So it's going to, do its big push in the spring and summer, but then you're going to get in the fall and even through winter, you're going to get these fragrant blooms showing up. It's evergreen in all of its range, which is another really useful tool. I can see this as being an excellent substitution for, say, boxwood or some of those less desirable, but not as exciting foundational plants that we put into our beds and borders. I already said that it's a super tightly bunched habit. So even though it's a spreader, it's really, really compact. The branching structure is just a nest of branches together. So it stays really, really compact and tight. It likes moist, well-drained soil. It does best in partial shade. You put it in too much sun, those glossy leaves tend to burn out a little bit, like a lot of variegated plants do. Here's the thing, though. Don't move it. Everything that I read said that this is a finicky plant to transplant. So make sure when you decide the tight space that you're going to put this creeping variegated gardenia in, that's the place it's going to stay, because there are so many reports online of people who said, well, then I dug it up and it died. And then I had to move it and it died. So clearly this is something that you want to make sure that's where it's going to stay and it will be beautiful and happy year round. But, I wish I lived in a warmer zone. Definite zone envy on this one. So Carol, we're kicking off small, tight, compact plants with 2 shrubs. I love it. But I think that's an important, point to make that, there are tight and compact, small space trees. There are small, shrubs. This is just, species that stay a little more, well behaved than you're used to with perhaps the straight species or straight genus.
Absolutely. A lot of good choices out there. And like sort of anything you might consider putting in a container would fit into this category. So, and vice versa. So the shrubs that we were talking about, I think both of those would make great container plants too.
100%. So with that said, did you have more woodies on your list, or are we going to talk about a perennial next?
We're going to talk about an annual next. I thought I'd slip an annual in there.
Oh, she's keeping me on my toes early in the morning.
Yeah. So this is one that I tried for the first time last year. We got a sample in the mail from Renee's garden. And I thought, I'll give this a try. It is called Rainbow Bouquet Dwarf Strawflower. That's Helichrysum bracteus Rainbow Bouquet. Mm-hmm. And it is an annual. And it had, I would say, excellent germination from that sample seed pack. I got hundreds, literally like more than 100 anyway, seedlings. And I was giving them away left and right to everyone I knew, but super easy to start. I started mine about 6 weeks before our final frost here in Connecticut. And when you set them out, you want to put them at least 6 to 8 inches apart. But they do look great in groups because what's nice about this mix, they call it Rainbow Bouquet for a reason. It has multiple colors of these pretty little straw flowers, which have the papery bracts. People call them everlasting because they can be dried and used in winter arrangements. But this mix has a nice little bit of white and like sort of a silvery pink color and a dark rose and an orange and a yellow.
Wow.
A salmon color. And so when you see them together, really, it kind of looks like a fun little bouquet. Once you get them in the ground, they start flowering pretty quickly. You usually see your first flowers within a couple weeks of planting if the seedlings have gotten nice and big in the pre-starting part of the phase. And pollinators love them once the flowers open. If you're going to use these flowers for crafts, the tradition is kind of to pick them before they fully open and before the pollen is exposed in them. But I just left them alone this summer. I didn't harvest any. I left them for the pollinators, and they were bees and butterflies on it all summer long. I had them out by the mailbox. I had them tucked in everywhere, as I said.
Well, you had 100 seedlings to get rid of, so
I did. But you can put like 20 of these in a bed and they take up very, very little space. You sort of plant them in a grid. And because they have so many different colors, it's just like automatic interest and, great filler, I would say.
Nice. Oh, that's so cool. So I love the fact that, so is it each blossom can have a mix of all those different colors, or is it each flower is a different solid color in that sunsetty type range?
Each plant will make its own sort of range of colors, and they do kind of evolve. So you'll see a different color when it first opens, and then after it's been on the plant for a while, it's usually paler. But yeah, so if you've got a plant that's making pink flowers, they're all going to be some version of pink.
Nice. That's so cool. Carol, do you think that this would do well as a container plant?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you could tuck a few of these into a container. Absolutely. And they make a ton of seed. So I'm saving the seed, and I think to be sure that you're going to get the nice dwarf size, which stays like about a foot tall, I would say. I'm not sure that the next generation is going to do that. So I would say if a person really wants a guarantee of the small plants, you probably need to buy the fresh seed every year. But I'm going to give it a try because they did produce like not a ton of seed, but like thousands and thousands and thousands of seeds.
So at the end of this episode, we're going to give out Carol's home address, and come May 1st, if you want to do a drive-by and get some of these plants, she'll just throw them into the window as you pass by, listeners.
Yeah, don't slow down or you're going to end up with strawflower seedlings.
I love it. I love it. That is so cool. And I think I kudos to you for throwing an annual in the mix, because even though I said at the top of the episode, I don't want to fill in the gaps with the annuals. Truth be told, that's a great use for annuals, is, filling in those tight spaces in your beds, in your borders that really, you're waiting for a plant to mature and fill in, or you do have kind of an awkward gap and you don't want to shoehorn something in and maybe potentially disturb the root system of the existing plants in there. Annuals are perfect for that. And it sounds like this is a good option. So I'll remember that, and I'll drive by at 50 miles per hour. We're going to see how your aim is, Carol. Oh my goodness. All right. So I'm going to talk about a favorite genus and species of yours, but a newer cultivar that stays a bit more compact. And, this is kind of a theme, right? So, you've got a straight genus and species and a plant that's beloved, but perhaps has, some not so desirable traits. It gets too big, it's floppy, it, is disease prone. So, the plant breeders work on them a little bit and try to get maybe a more compact habit. And this is a case of that. It's Prairie Moon rattlesnake master. So Euringium yuccifolium Prairie Moon. It's zones 3 to 8. So this is a native plant, an eastern U.S. native from Ontario down to Florida, all the way over to Iowa and eastern Texas down into the south. So it's got a big swath of nativeness to it. And this particular cultivar was a selection from Brett Horvath at Intrinsic Perennials, who's out in the Midwest. And that's kind of Brett's bread and butter, right? He works with these Midwest and Eastern U.S. natives and does a lot of breeding on them to try and, see if there's desirable traits that he can select for. And in this case, because standard straight species rattlesnake master, it can get pretty big, depending on where you live and what the conditions are. If it's in its happiest, most ideal conditions, this plant is going to be 3, sometimes 4 feet, very rarely 5 feet tall, and about half as wide. So, that's a large perennial. That is a commitment of a perennial. And not for nothing, it's super cool. It's got, blue, strappy, yucca-like foliage, hence the, species name yuccifolium. Very, very cool. Shoots up these rocket stems with these little, kind of creamy white thimble-like flowers on them. But when you've got a plant that's that tall and then rockets up some flowers on it that are kind of heavy, you get the flopsy mopsies. This plant is something that does really, really well in a prairie garden setting where grasses and such are, kind of holding it up and letting it hold its own. Otherwise, you're probably going to have to stake this plant. But Prairie Moon, on the other hand, is about half as tall and half as wide. So we're talking 1.5 to 2 feet tall and wide, and really holds its own. It was selected especially for it staying really, really a tight basal rosette, shooting up a not as tall rocket of flowers and really holding its tight, compact structure. So far better suited for a quote unquote normal garden setting. I came across this plant in the garden of Jeff Epping out in Madison, Wisconsin. Jeff is the former director of Olbert Gardens in Madison, Wisconsin. And he recently, in the past, 4 or 5 years, converted his entire front yard to a gravel garden, ripped out every little bit of turf, had his neighbors in an uproar about what the heck is this guy doing? He's got dump trucks that are backing in and throwing tons upon tons of gravel in the front yard. They thought he'd lost his mind. But it's now gorgeous, gorgeous gravel garden that is just a beautiful array of native pollinator plants. And this Prairie Moon rattlesnake master was along one of the pathways. And I looked at Jeff and said, why does this thing look so good? Why is it not flopping all over the place into the walkway? And he had pointed out that it's this variety Prairie Moon from Brent Horvath. This is clearly because it's, got native prairie origins, full sun, well-drained soil, will tolerate lean soil too. So if you've got an area that hasn't been, liberally amended over the years, I'm thinking hill strips, I'm thinking my hospital hill, this would be a plant that would do really well in that situation. And I already kind of alluded to it, but those, moon-like, orbs of flowers, these thimble-like flowers that appear at the top of the plant are really a great pollinator plant. It's not your typical umbel type flower that, we all know pollinators love, but they tend to flock all around it. And this plant, when I walked by, it was just alive with activity of pollinators. So I would say, Prairie Moon rattlesnake master, if you're a fan of pollinator plants, if you're a fan of the straight species, but you really needed something that was a bit more compact, try this newer variety, Prairie Moon. All right, Carol, I'm not even going to try and guess because I could be like, hey, now you're going to give us a tree. And you'd be like, no, I'm going to give you a rock instead. No, what is your next plant?
Okay, this is a shrub, a nice little itty bitty shrub. It's a hydrangea, and it is called Let's Dance Skyview hydrangea. Yeah. Oh, it's got a fun name, right? This is an interspecific hybrid. It is Hydrangea macrophylla X serrata. So it was bred specifically to bloom and rebloom, bloom on old wood and rebloom on new wood throughout the summer. It has a kind of a funny, hard to remember scientific name. That's SMNHSME, but you can just call it Let's Dance Skyview. It likes full sun to partial shade, average to moist, well-drained soil, just like sort of all of your hydrangeas. It will appreciate, also like most hydrangeas, some supplemental water if you get hot, dry summer weather. But it stays so nice and small. It has a mounding habit. It gets 24 to 36 inches tall, up to 48 inches wide. So it can sort of sprawl out a little bit, but stays nice and close to the ground. And the color of these flowers is amazing. So then the name Skyview is because if this plant is growing in acidic soil, or if you amend your non-acidic soil to acidify it, it has this gorgeous sort of sky blue color that it starts out with a green eye, and then the whole sterile floret goes blue. And I found that at the end of the season in fall, the older florets will go almost purple. And they'll all be on the plant at the same time.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's such a pretty color. And so I would say if you don't have acidic soil, might be worth growing this one in a container and adding that aluminum sulfate to make the soil in your container acidic. I did a video on pressed flowers, and I would say that these flowers were the star of that video. They pressed.
Oh, is that what okay, it's this variety. I was wait, blue hydrangeas, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and they hold that color too. So when you press them, if they're blue when you press them, they stay blue. If they're purple, they stay purple. So I'm a huge fan. Great for crafting, looks great in the garden. I will say that I had to put up some very ugly deer protection because one chomp from a deer, this little guy that I have is like a foot tall right now, and that would have been the end of him. So I used some, green wire fencing, and I just built a little cage around it. And it's not ideal, but I just, it beats the alternative of having the plant eaten overnight.
Right. I've never heard somebody describe like a habit, like how big and tall is it? Well, it's bite-sized, it's a bite-sized hydrangea. I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm a big fan. This came as a sample. I think it was just last year I added it, and it did great its first summer, and it's doing great over the winter. So I'm very optimistic. What I really want to see, because this will be the first spring where it has come through a Connecticut winter in the ground, and I'm curious to see how it flowers this year, especially since we've been getting that Arctic blast the past month or so.
Yeah.
And so those cold temperatures are really going to test its ability to hold buds on the old wood. So I'll be curious how soon it starts to flower next summer.
Right. But at least, one would think because it's an interspecific, perhaps that serrata, the mountain hydrangea for the new wood, perhaps that'll at least redeem itself, because we've talked about on the podcast ad nauseum, macrophyllus for us now are almost not even worth it. We have such unpredictable winter weather patterns that, it's a crapshoot if you get flowers at all. So, that's an interest. And I think plant breeders realize that, right? Macrophyllus have gotten that bad rap, deservedly, because really, if you can't count on the blossoms for a standard green hydrangea, then why bother? Right. So yeah, let's cross it with a mountain hydrangea that's a bit hardier and a more reliable bloomer for colder areas. So report back. And that whole Let's Dance series, I will say, I feel like I might have like Let's Dance Ariba or something like that. That was one of the first ones that came out of that series. And it's doing quite well and has done quite well the last couple of winters. But we've had mild winters up until this year. So yeah, very interesting. Check out that whole series. I don't remember who put that out. It might have been, you know what? I better not say.
Right. I think it comes in a white pot.
Yes. I'm not sure. So I'm going to just zip it right up. Well, listen, my next plant is a shrub too, in fact. And I do know for sure who bred this plant or who is the introducer of this plant. And that's Bailey Nurseries. They didn't sponsor this episode, folks, I promise, but it just so happens they've done a lot of work recently on these smaller, tighter, more compact shrubs. And this is Spicy Devil ninebark. So it's Physocarpus opiifolius, and it's Zen Latale. So it's Zlenatale. There's got to be somebody who was like a Natalie that was like in the mix of this, and maybe a Zorro, and then they combined their names, and that's what it is. But all you need to remember is it's Spicy Devil, and that's zones 3 to 7. This is a North American nativar. We love Physocarpus. We love ninebarks. They're just, we could go on and on about their great characteristics. Typically they have these, this burgundy foliage to them, which is so beautiful. They have gorgeous umbel pink flowers in the late spring into early summer that the pollinators just obsess over. Over time, it gets this exfoliating cinnamon-like bark to the shrub. So you're getting winter interest. And occasionally, you get some nice fall color that goes into kind of the orangey range. Here's the thing. A lot of the standard ninebarks get ginormous. I think I have Diablo, which was one of the original, maybe the original 6 ninebarks. The thing's giant. It is 8x8. I do renovation pruning on it every couple of years. It still gets to be 8x8, 6x6. It's huge. It's a big shrub, and it's impressive and gorgeous. Has this fountain-like appearance to it. Several years ago, I planted Little Devil, which was a dwarf variety that I believe gets to be about 5 feet tall, maybe 4.5 feet tall by 3 feet wide. Here's my problem with Little Devil. Over time, it has this splaying look to it. So it was supposed to be more compact, give you a nice rounded shrub, but it really has started to open up and splay for me. Same conditions. It's not in any more shade. I think it's just an unfortunate habit of the plant over time. So I'm really excited this year. I'm going to replace it with a plant that I've had my eye on for about a year or so because it was fairly new. And I think it was new in 2022 is Spicy Devil. So this is, to my eye, the most compact ninebark that I have seen. It's very, very rounded in its habits, not perfectly so, but it gives you more of a, that cozy, I want to hug it, tight, compact variety. And it has, as you kind of can tell from its name, spicy. It's got a lot of red highlighting through it. So the new growth comes out and it's this very vibrant cayenne red, spicy orange color as the new growth. And then it maintains that kind of at the tips of each one of those burgundy leaves that are on the shrub. The stems of it too, I will say, are a very, very bright red, orangey red, if you will, not a dark red like you're used to with some of the other ninebarks. And then in fall, it lights up and it looks like this, perfectly shaped, like the flame emoji on your phone, right? It looks just like that. It's the same shape as the flame emoji. It gets this orangey yellow color to it. And I just like the fact that it stays so, so tiny. So we're talking about 3 feet tall and 3 feet wide. Perfection. Absolute perfection. Full sun, well-drained soil. Ninebarks really aren't picky about your soil. I have, a pretty lousy track record of amending my soil. It's lean, it's, kind of gravelly, and ninebarks do really, really well in that area. I will say, if you're somebody who loves the sprawling, almost fountain-like habit of a ninebark, Spicy Devil's not for you. It doesn't have that habit. It definitely is a distinctly different habit than a typical large-size ninebark. But, for all intents and purposes, still gets those pink flowers, albeit a little bit smaller, still is going to attract pollinators, and is really a noteworthy nativar that is on my project list this spring, that I will be digging out my little devils, which just didn't do what I needed them to do. I need something that's a little more tight and compact, and I will be replacing them with Spicy Devils instead. And yeah, that's a Bailey Nurseries plant. Again, they didn't sponsor this, but they have some really good dwarf shrubs. All right, Carol, bring it on home. What have you got for your last plant in the tight plants for compact spaces?
Okay, so I thought I should slip a perennial in here because I haven't done a perennial this whole episode, which is kind of weird for me. So my perennial that I thought I would throw out there as a great solution in small spaces is Summer Beauty Allium. That's Allium tanguticum, Summer Beauty, and it is hardy from zones 4 to 9. And this is just a really nice, durable, carefree, summer blooming allium. This is not one of those bulbs that you plant in the fall. This is treated as a perennial. It likes full sun, well-drained soil, not real fussy about, except it does, it is fussy about sun. If you put it in shade, it's not going to flower, but not super fussy about the soil. This was among the top scoring perennial alliums in the trial that the Chicago Botanic Garden did. And what I'll do is drop a link to the Richard Hockey article in the show notes so that if you haven't seen that, I would say any plant in that article would probably fit this bill, because these summer blooming alliums, it's a clumping habit, right? They stay nice and small, 8 to 12 inches tall, really not much wider than that, linear, strappy green foliage that looks great all season. So again, it's another hardworking plant that from the time that foliage gets above the ground in the spring until fall, it looks great. And it has these beautiful lavender pink globe-shaped umbels that are about 2 inches in diameter. And those are on top of the scapes from midsummer right through until fall. Once the flowering is done, it holds the seed heads, and it really is a fun little thing to leave in for winter interest. And what's cool is that the fruit are sterile. So you can leave these seeds on there. You don't have to worry about it seeding around. And the pollinators, when it is in flower, absolutely love it, especially the bees. I planted 6 pots of this in 2000, so I've had it about 4 years. And what I found is that it stays where you put it. But this fall, I decided that I wanted to spread it around a little. And so I dug up the clumps, I broke them up, and there were just hundreds of plants, right? And you can spread them out and they will cover more ground. But it's like, that's your choice. If you wanted to sort of just stay the same, it would just stay the same for pretty much, it's a very long-lived plant for years. In the trial, Richard Hockey started out, it was just going to be an evaluation. He was going to test summer beauty against one of its sports, which is even more compact, that's summer peekaboo. And summer peekaboo stays, the flowers stay right about the same height as the foliage. So it stays under 8 inches tall. And so if you're looking for an even more compact summer allium, I'd say go with summer peekaboo. But I think this looks great around the bases of shrubs. It looks good as a mass planting. It would look great in a gravel garden. It would even, I think, work in a container. So yeah, a useful perennial that you can use a lot of different ways, I would say, for summer beauty.
I love the summer blooming alliums. I really do. I think I have serendipity, and I think I might have a couple of millennium, which was kind of the original summer blooming allium that came to, everybody's attention when Pete Udolph was using it so much. But yeah, it's a great plant. And I think it was super important for you to point out that these are sterile. Like, these aren't going to seed all over the place. People see them and immediately think chives, common chives, and think absolutely not, no way. These things are going to seed all over the place, like common chives or garlic chives, anything in that family. But this is not the same animal. Similar look, but not the same animal at all. I love that plant. I think that plant has so many different applications. It really does. And I need to now look up is it peekaboo?
Summer peekaboo. Yeah. Oh. And it's a genetic offshoot of summer beauty. So it has really a lot of the same look. Just shorter.
Oh my gosh, that sounds really adorable.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. All right. So the last plant, I was going through, okay, I can do another dwarf shrub. Oh, yeah. Let me talk about, another woody plant. But I thought, no, Danielle, come on, get out of your comfort zone. Let's do another perennial. And I started thinking about, so often we talk about, color, texture, form, right? And when you get into form, that can be tough with tight and compact plants. Do they have bold forms? Well, not really, because they are tight and compact. So I was thinking about a bold form and maybe a bold texture perennial that is well behaved and stays in bounds. And, at first I started thinking about, maybe there's a hosta out there. But I'll say, even there's the huge hostas, of course, that wouldn't work. And then, there's the tiny micro mini hostas. But honestly, those, to me, I've got some. There's not all that exciting. So what about a medium? That's not really bold, but hostas over time, though, do chunk out. It's like they go on the holiday diet and they start to spread and chunk out. So I thought, what about brunnera? Which I feel like brunnera is a well-behaved, bold in form, bold in texture, perennial for the shade that really does stay well-behaved, has a similar look and visual appeal to it as a hosta, but isn't going to go on that holiday diet and chunk out over time. I feel like any brunnera, probably, maybe except for the cultivar Alexander the Great, which gets really big, would fit the bill for a tight and compact, lovely plant. But I just went with Jack of Diamonds, which is a newer variety. So that's brunnera macrophylla, Jack of Diamonds. It's zones 3 to 8. Brunneras do really well in colder climates. you can expect it to be basically 1.5 to 2 feet tall and wide, really stays, kind of chunky and low to the ground, a nice mounded habit to it. Big, bold leaves that are, sometimes 6 to 8 inches across, that are heart-shaped, really, really lobed, beautiful leaves. This particular variety, Jack of Diamonds, has a dark, dark, dark emerald green, like almost a blackish green leaf to it with a silver overlay. But it's not so silver as you see with, Jack Frost. So the silver overlay allows those veins of the dark green to kind of show through. So I almost feel like the way I described it was it's the perfect blend of silver and green. It's probably a 50-50 ratio on these leaves, which really gives them some dimensionality to it that just kind of is shocking. It's very, very gorgeous. Basically, you can expect it to do well in a medium moisture situation. I already said shade to partial shade. Don't put brunneras in sun. They tend to crisp out very, very unattractively with a brown edge all the way around them. So that's not their cup of tea. Over time, brunneras are drought tolerant for the most part. I will say most of the catalogs say that. However, we went through a pretty extreme drought not too many years ago. It might have been 2 years ago. And my brunneras were starting to struggle. So I did have to give them some supplemental water when we went on to like week 8 with not any moisture whatsoever. They get blue forget-me-not like flowers in the spring, but unlike typical forget-me-nots, they are not invasive. They will not spread all over the place. You might get a few little offsets and reseeders here and there. I really honestly wish that, the brunneras would do that a bit more. I could use a few more in my garden. But just a really nice shade perennial that has a bold look to it, but definitely stays in its lane, stays in bound, as the kids would say. It stays in the lane. And I think that this is a good option for those of you who are looking for bold, but need something a little more tight and compact, if you will. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about, oh, come on, Peter, compact cars. All right, you're really stretching it now.
Whatever happened to the compact car? I entered a garage the other day, and in one particular tight section, there were signs that said, compact cars only. And you know what types of cars I saw parked in those precious few spots? That's right, SUVs. Now, granted, they were on the smaller side of the SUV spectrum. There was a Volkswagen something or other, and I definitely saw a Honda CX-87654 or some such number. But none of the occupants were compact vehicles by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure there are still plenty of those smaller models on the road. I know, because I drive one. But you'll be hard-pressed to see them anymore here in the States. When I drive on the roadways on the East Coast, I mostly see larger cars, SUVs, pickup trucks, minivans, and so-called crossover vehicles. They're all big, burly, and certainly not fit for parking in tight spaces. Yet they dominate everyday life. I'd like to see compact cars make a comeback. Overseas, they tend to dominate the streets, particularly in cities where roads are narrow and parking is usually non-existent. The last time I visited the UK, I rented a microcar that was only 98.4 inches long. The idea seemed rather novel until my 6-foot 1.5-inch frame tried to squeeze into the driver's seat. When I boarded the airplane home a week later, my knees ached and I had a large egg-shaped lump on my head from repeatedly banging said head on the car roof. But I had somehow easily found parking in London every day, so I guess that was a decent trade-off. And therein lies the rub. Compact cars, like compact plants, may be more practical when it comes to certain things like fitting into tight spaces, as, say, in a city, but larger options are often more comfortable or familiar. And so by default, we tend to choose the bigger is better mentality, even if it's not appropriate given our intended use. I say we should all apply one of the golden tenets of gardening to our car selections from now on. Right car for the right place.
All right, Carol, I got to give it to him. He brought compact cars somehow back around to be relevant in the compact plants episode. He's a genius.
He is. He definitely is.
Well, let's lean into some more genius level plant knowledge here and see who we have up next for the expert testimony.
I'm Julie Lane Gay, a former nursery owner and now a custom propagator and garden writer in Vancouver, BC. Our climate is similar to Seattle's, with winters far more wet than cold. By the thermometer, we're zone 8, but because of our 60 inches of rain each year, we need to garden like we're in zone 7. Always wanting space for another new plant, it's tempting to prune bigger plants so they'll squeeze into smaller spaces in containers. But I have increasingly learned it is far better to find plants that are naturally suited to tight places. They're more likely to thrive for the long haul, and well, they just look so much more comfortable there. Without a doubt, my favorite tree for narrow spaces is the flowering crabapple, Adirondack. I have 3 enclosing a patio in my back garden, and even in midwinter, these vase-shaped trees are covered with small Breton red fruits. They aren't edible for you and me, but they make birds very happy, and their color cheers up a garden's appearance on a gray day. I planted my 3 trees 12 years ago, and now they're 4 feet wide and 14 feet high. They certainly aren't tiny, but they fit in a wide range of smaller spots. Yet what I love most about these crabapples is their 4 seasons of interest. In the spring, they have pinkish red buds, which in late April open into a profusion of creamy white flowers with yellow eyes. They're the most floriferous of any crabapple, maybe spring-flowering tree, I've ever seen. The flowers are followed by fruit in early summer, which provide a cheery backdrop for the annuals and perennials without detracting from them. In the Pacific Northwest, and I hope elsewhere, the leaves turn a cheery yellow in the fall. These disappear in late November, but the reddish fruits remain until they make way for the spring flower buds. Adirondack is by far the most disease-resistant of any crabapple I've seen. It's hardy in zones 4 to 8, maybe to zone 9, and it prefers full sun and reasonable moisture. It's even drought-tolerant once it's established. About the only thing this tree ever complains about is standing water. I've grown a number of heavenly bamboo shrubs, or nandinas, which aren't actually scary bamboos at all. But my new favorite is a compact form called Firepower Heavenly Bamboo. It's about 18 inches tall by 2 feet wide, maybe 15 inches wide, though I've heard it can expand a bit wider if you want it to. I first saw it in the late fall in a bright red perfect line at the base of a 6-foot yew hedge. It was such a classy combination. Firepower gets limish green leaves in spring, which stay green all summer, but come late September, its foliage turns bright red, and it stays that way all winter. Hardy to zone 6, my understanding is this heavenly bamboo will lose some of its leaves in a colder winter, but they come back strong in the spring. Firepower doesn't flower or put out the usual berries. You can just grow it for the leaves, and while the red color is a spectacular feature in the sun, I recently saw heavenly bamboo firepower surrounding a fountain in a very shady courtyard. It was lush green, and it looked like the best of serene picture frames. I love climbers of all sorts, particularly clematis, but it can be hard to find ones that fit smaller spots or narrow trellis. The Clematis integrifolia group are ideal for this. They're 3 to 6 feet tall, and they often spread only 2 feet wide. These are actually sprawlers. Their sturdy stems don't climb. They ably scramble up trellises or shrubs. They offer a great punctuation of color, cascading a few feet down a stone wall. Clematis integrifolias come in blues, purples, and pinks, and there's one named Olga that's fragrant. I grow Clematis integrifolia Pamiat surdsta, a fantastic deep purple Ukrainian introduction, in a large pot where it shimmies up a trellis behind an apricot shrub rose. Another impressive Clematis integrifolia is one called Blue Boy, with 3-inch steely nodding blue flowers that look fantastic, scampering up a late flowering butterfly bush. Clematis integrifolias all grow in zones 3 to 9. They like full sun with a cool root zone and a good feeding of rose food and steer manure in the early spring. Their pruning needs of this clematis are another fine feature. Come February, maybe March, gather up all their stems like a ponytail and make one cut straight across about 4 to 6 inches above the ground. That's it. Bees and butterflies love them. If you want a shorter variety, try the species Clematis integrifolia or durandii, which go to 2 to 3 feet. For the taller ones, try the Blue Boy or Pamiat surdsta, or if you can find it, the elegant soft pink form, also Ukrainian, allianuska. More than 20 years ago, Dan Hinckley, the renowned plant explorer and writer, gave a talk about his favorite plants of Asia. And after telling us about the bugbane called brunette, He paused as he looked up at his slide, and then he said, "There really is nothing quite as good." I, of course, immediately went in search of this bugbane brunette, and I've had it in my garden ever since. Slim perennials can sound like an oxymoron, but bugbane brunette, laden with the Latin name Actea simplex atropurpurea group brunette, is ideal for narrow spots, reaching upward with its sturdy, wiry stems to 3 to 4 feet and topped with exceptionally fragrant and cheery white bottlebrush flowers. It's one of those plants that make you think, what smells so good, before you even see what the plant is. Sometimes called snakeroot or black cohosh, its racemes of white flowers begin in August and last well into October. And while some of the taller forms need a stake, brunette stands with ease. A neighbor grows it with the bull's golden sedge, a yellow grass, for a very dramatic combination. I slide it in amongst the hostas, ferns, and hydrangeas. Hardy in zone 3 to 8, this bugbane can grow in a full sun or nearly fully shade spot as long as its roots stay moist. Deer dislike it, and birds and bees love it, and needless to say, I do too.
Well, Carol, I have to say, we've been talking about plants for, 2 months worth of winter, and it's been somewhat depressing because spring did not seem like it was around the corner, but we're on the precipice of March now, and I'm getting a little excited.
Yeah, this is shopping season, y'all. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
If you can't wait to plant, shop. That's what I say.
Right. That's right. I love it. And now I have a lot more compact plants to shop for. All right. We'll see y'all next time.